time or another, we've said, why me, Lord? Why me? And this morning, it's why we can so identify with Job. And Job said, today also my complaint is bitter. Job. And then there is a turning point. Because what's the answer when we are complaining to God and saying, why me? We usually haven't stopped to pray, and not just praying as complaining and asking and whining like we sometimes do, but praying and listening. Listening to God's word about what is important. Have you ever stopped on a why me occasion to say, Lord, what am I supposed to learn from this? And I know some of you have, because we share these experiences and comments together. I know some of you have, but it's such a difficult thing to do. To go from saying, why me? Have you been anywhere where you see, the signs that are red with a line through them? And it might say no parking. It might say, whatever, no entry. Well, I like the one that says no wine zone. And I like to think of prayer as being that time where we are in a no wine zone. We are in the zone where we are asking God, inviting God, and not just saying, why me, Lord? Because that why me can be very special or very judgmental. Not just why me, but, okay, Lord, here we are. What now? Okay, Lord, here we are. What am I supposed to learn from this? How will you grow? Help me to see your path. Job put it this way. In verse 3 of our chapter 23, oh, that I knew where I might find him, that I might come even to his dwelling. I would learn what he would answer me and understand what he would say to me. Job turning a significant corner. Going from being the whiner, the complainer, the one to whom all these things have happened, and yet can say, oh, that I knew where I might find him. Because sometimes life is so dark, so filled with grief, anxiety, everyday complaints and questions and busyness, that we not only can't find God, but the main reason we can't find God is because we haven't stopped to look for God. We are so focused on the next minute, the alarm clock, our schedule, the phone calls that are coming in, what we have to do. God? Oh yeah, God. Oh, that I knew where I might find him. Because Job goes on to say, if I go forward, he's not there, or backward, I can't see him. On the left he hides, and I cannot behold him. I turn to the right, but I cannot see him. But he knows the way that I take. Job says, I know that wherever God is, no matter how much I don't see of it, I know God is there. My foot has held fast to his steps. I have kept his way and have not turned aside. You know, it's a real statement of faith. How many have had moments of depression, of fear, of grief, of mourning, of just being frightened to death, wondering where the next step in life is coming from? There are many stories in this economic time. One of a young couple, I guess they're approaching middle age, 39, 40. She's an attorney, he's a pilot. So you say, these people have nothing to fear in these times. But since he lost his job, and since our attorney wife was working part-time to be home and available to the children, they fell on hard times. And they wound up selling their home. They said, what shall we do? And they said, and you know, we go to church regularly. And sometimes we found we forget to pray. But we stopped and we talked with each other. I love that line. A lot of husbands and wives who live in the same household and still don't really talk to each other. They talked to each other and they prayed together. And they decided it was time to sell their house. They moved into an apartment. They stayed in the neighborhood so that their children could continue in the same school. But they significantly downsized their lives. And now they talk about being happier than they were before. It's that difference that takes us from the time of Job, who's saying, where are you in my time of trouble, into our passage in Mark, where the man says, how do I get into heaven? And Jesus says, sell what you have and give to the poor. And sometimes we're so busy working for status symbols, and sometimes that's the lesson God is giving us. And in sharing with this couple and sharing their joy in their newfound life, which was simpler, which had fewer bills, which had fewer problems, so that even as they recovered economically, they decided to continue with their reduced size of living. A very interesting perception. Very interesting because they said it gives us more to share with our children, with ourselves, more time with each other, and more to offer to our church and other charities. As a minister, I kind of go, wow. Somebody heard the lesson. How often have we reached that point where we have no idea where God is, where we are so hurting that we cannot find God? A friend of mine, Captain Select in the U.S. Navy, had come back from Iraq. And one day, I and other friends were stunned to discover that he had taken his own life. Unfortunately, it can lead to that. Unfortunately, if we can't find God, we reach that point where we know we cannot carry on our own. What can we bring to others? We can bring the story of God's power. We can bring the story of God who binds up the waters in thick clouds, covers the face of the moon, describes the circle of the face of the waters. The pillars of heaven tremble. By his power he stills the sea. This is the power of God. And yet, God doesn't work in these powerful ways in our lives. Oh, if he did, we still might find ways not to recognize that that was God at work. But God tends to work in small ways. My friend who is the pilot now says, you know, losing my job for those 6 months was actually a gift from God. I have other people who make very strange declarations of how they found God. I have a friend who's a paraplegic who had been leading a life of drugs and alcohol, who wound up in a car crash, and a paraplegic, focused on his studies and his recovery, and loved creating projects that help children learn about God's creation. And he said, I thank God every day for waking me up. It's my fault for being so blind and deaf that God had to work so hard at it. God finds a way. For most, God finds the way in less radical means. Hopefully we can open our hearts. Hopefully we can recognize that God is at work. Remember the words of Job. Oh, if I knew where I might find him. So that when we are in our greatest joy or our greatest sorrow, let's not forget to look for God. In the book of Mark, when the man came forward and said, how do I get into the kingdom of heaven? And Jesus said, you do it by keeping the commandments. He said, I've done this all my life. He said, you do it by selling what you have and giving to the poor. And the man said, nothing. He walked away sad because he had many belongings. The problem isn't in the belongings. The problem is in where is our heart. How much time do we spend taking care of our belongings, our things, our stuff, versus how much time do we spend in conversation, in caring for one another? What do we do in God's eyes? And ultimately, to remember, it is in God's power to save any of us. What do we have to do? Come with open hearts and have the courage to ask. Amen. Amen. Our hymn is number 320, The Lone Wild Bird.